Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from whichever part of the world that you're watching from. And welcome to Water as a Tool to Address Fragility, Conflict, and Violence, a talk show brought to you by the World Bank here at the World Water Week in Stockholm. My name is Haji Yacoubi, and I will be your host for this talk show. So for me to you, a very warm welcome, whether you're tuning in online or whether you're here in the room with us in Sweden. It's amazing to have you all here. I think it underlines also the importance of the topic that we're going to discuss, because across the world, we see that the impact of climate change are increasingly felt through water. We know that scarcity, droughts, and floods put pressure on already existing fragile systems. And in many regions, water then has also the potential and the effect of being a catalyst and a casualty of conflict. Yet, we also know that water holds an extraordinary potential when managed cooperatively to foster peace, to foster resilience and human security. So because of that, in this talk show today, we will explore how the World Bank is engaging in this space, how it's leveraging its expertise, building partnerships, and supporting communities facing the intertwined challenges of water stress, of fragility and conflict. So I would say a lot to uncover, but luckily we have a stellar lineup of two speakers here with us. So I'm very delighted to be joined today, first of all, by Victor Vasquez, who is the Senior Water Specialist at the World Bank. Very nice to have you here.
Yes,
And
thank
then
you.
we're also joined by Anders Jägerskog, who's a Program Manager, Cooperation, International Waters in Africa Trust Fund at the World Bank. So it's amazing to have you here too. Welcome to the both of you.
Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
as I said, we got a lot to uncover. So maybe, Victor, if I can start with you, could you perhaps speak a little bit more as to how the World Bank is leveraging its expertise to address, so to say, like the unique challenges faced by countries that are experiencing conflict and fragility?
Yes, thank you. So, the World Bank, at the World Bank, we acknowledge that countries under fragility, conflict, or violence face a wide variety of situations that include, but not excluding, to weak institutions or no institutions at all sometimes, social exclusion, forced displacement, and these things can be aggravated, or they are, by climate change shocks and stressors, right? So towards that context, I think we put together a strategy of main four pillars. One, really working on prevention of the conflict and those situations. The second one, really engaging during conflict stage. The third one, transitioning out the conflict stage. And the fourth one, really managing the spillover effects.
Yeah.
That strategy is unfolded and adapted to each context with a package of comprehensive analytical work to understand the dynamics of the risks, but also being flexible on the financing options and really working with partners that are experts on the different contexts as well, in order to, at the end of the day, is to achieve the development objectives of the projects where we work.
Yeah. But it's interesting to hear how you have these distinctive phases, right? So you start with prevention, engaging, transitioning out, and eventually you want to get to, sort of collaborative action to also like make sure that you can foster peace in that sense. I'd be very interested later on in the conversation to hear a bit more about how we put that into practice, how the sort of like concrete daily life of putting that into action looks like. But before we do, I wanted to go to you, Anders, because in your work you focus also on Africa, and I wanted to ask you, as nations across Africa grapple with it's a whole myriad of different topics around the world that we deal with, but you have like a microcosm of the world also on the continent. Grappling with the intertwined challenges of water security, we have climate volatility, we have some nations that are dealing with recurring conflict. How is the World Bank, so to say, customizing its support to also address the different needs of regions on the continent?
Well, thank you very much, and it's great to be here. I think there's no lack of challenges, as you were pointing out, on the African continent, and unfortunately, we've seen that more countries in recent years have moved towards a fragile state, and we see more conflict. We see internal conflicts, but also wars between countries. So, as we address the challenges from a water perspective, we need to look at how water can be a source of stability, and often in certain parts of countries, water may not be provided as it should or is expected to within a country, and if the country, through World Bank support or through support from others, are able to provide that service, then one can see a decrease in the fragility in a country and less risk of conflict. Also, between countries, most of the water in Africa is actually shared. About 90% of the rainfall is ending up in basins, so rivers, lakes that are shared between countries, and groundwater is in a similar situation. So that also, if you address those river joint management and the potential that I can bring, it could be something that actually prevents conflict, so to speak, to one of the pillars. But if you don't, then you run the risk of actually increasing the situation, of the conflict situation. And if you have a number of fragile countries that are sharing the same river, say, then it's even more important to get them to, or support them in their efforts to cooperatively manage and develop that resource. So we are focusing through the trust fund that I'm working in, but also through engagement at the national level, supporting countries coming together and managing these resources in a cooperative manner.
Yeah, and I mean, you speak a little bit, right, to the transnational sort of like nature of basins and rivers and how that can be seen as a catalyst for peace, because you need to cooperate together. There needs to be collaboration. I mean, it's like almost geographically determined to be so, which is a good catalyst. I mean, I take that as a bit of a lesson because we have transnational rivers and basins all over the world. Are there some other lessons that you see within the African context that you think are transferable to other continents on the world, to other regions, other countries in the world?
Yeah, I wanted to highlight one recent development, and that's in West Africa, the Senegal-Mauritania Aquifer Basin, which is a shared groundwater system. The countries sharing that resource are actually coming together, developing a framework under which they will cooperatively manage the resource, which is a way of both developing it in a sustainable manner, but also then avoiding conflict. And why is this transferable? Why is this inspirational for other regions? Actually, if you look at agreements and frameworks on transboundary groundwater, there are only a handful in the whole world. And I think Africa here, and West Africa in this case, this specific case, the Senegal-Mauritania Aquifer Basin, they are leading the way in showing that it's possible to come together over a shared groundwater resource. We need to see much more of that in Africa, but also globally. So I think there are lessons to be learned from this particular experience that would be inspirational to other parts of the world.
Yeah, they can inspire other people indeed, as case studies, so to say. Thank you so much for sharing that. Victor, if I could go to you, I would love to hear maybe from your side also if you could elaborate and help us understand a little bit more if there are any innovative strategies or partnerships that the World Bank is engaging in to really also help vulnerable communities achieve water security and thus also sustainable peace in the long run that the World Bank is engaging in.
Yeah, I thank you. I can also answer with an example and a specific project that we handle in the Horn of Africa, where we try to provide access to groundwater as a transboundary resource in the borderlands of those countries in the Horn of Africa. So these are areas with very low presence of formal institutions. These are areas that are subject to high stress from climate shocks, especially in the dry periods. And groundwater is a buffer that provides the resilience, but also you need to understand the dynamics of the pastoralist population that really move constantly in search of water and pastures. And these areas are areas of natural conflict, and there are clashes between different ethnic groups, etc., when the stress is high. So, as I said before, we start together with putting together a comprehensive package of analytics to really understand the dynamics of those conflicts. So, for example, siting of the boreholes where we drill is very important. So, you want to alleviate a problem, not to create a new one. So, if you drill boreholes in pastoralist routes, you know, that in a rangeland could be sensitive, and that dynamic needs to be understood. Then once we are in the implementation, we have tools that we use all the times. We work with security management plans. So these are very comprehensive, practical plans that defines or explains the dynamics of the conflict, but also establish the roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders around the project. It really establishes roles also on the community and how they are engaged, the protocols of incident reporting, incident management, and conflict situation. And these are day-to-day documents that we use in the implementation of the project.
Right.
And last, we work also with experts on this. I mean,
Right.
so we work with what we call third-party monitoring, which have expertise in this kind of situations in different projects. We use these experts for constant reporting, monitoring that help us be, managing in advance, and also in extreme cases we even implement through third parties as well that are experts on this. Yeah.
That's really that's amazing to hear. Also, like the extensive sort of like array of steps that you then take. You mentioned also with the security management plans, the engagement of communities. What is that like? Because I can also imagine, like in sort of like fragile or tensed context, that's quite the operation also to undertake.
Yes, so I think I talked before about the low presence of formal institutions in these
Right.
areas. So working with informal institutions, the customary law, the ancient, the tradition, the oral tradition that has to be factored in the project implementation and the management of these water schemes, etc., is super important. And the same for managing the security situation that sometimes are very peculiar to the context, like
Right, yeah.
in a drought situation where the borehole is not producing the expected yield. What happens if the community 30 kilometers away comes because they don't have the sources, but you have it, and
Right.
now it's a tenfold demand on water. So who
Right.
drinks first? All these customary traditions are incorporated in the rules on how to manage the scheme, etc. So,
yeah. Yeah, that provides quite the context, especially because you said also like what I take from that is also how important it is to understand sort of like the cultural, traditional sort of context of the region, and then also indeed how can you work with, well, if there's formal institutions, formal, but otherwise informal indeed, to make sure that you can navigate that. Anders, I wanted to go to you because could you also maybe, and I would love maybe if you have like examples of this, but concretize a little bit for us which analytics are sort of like directly influencing policy or investment decisions on the ground when it comes to trying to foster sustainable peace through water action?
Oh, no, thank you. So a couple of examples. I think we are inspired by the FCV strategy, the fragility, conflict and violence strategy that Victor was talking about, and the concrete ideas and measures and policies and guidelines to, for example, then prevent conflict. So that's one. Within the program of SIVA, the Cooperation in International Waters in Africa, we have developed a framework for addressing fragility, conflict and violence, which is a concrete document. It's accessible to of course, internally within the World Bank, but it's accessible publicly as well. The idea is that this framework is used as we in the World Bank, together with our partners that we support, when we develop jointly a project, the sort of guidelines and the policies and ideas that are in this is supposed to guide them. And this is to make sure that, and Victor has talked about this in this particular case, that the right considerations are made so that we are not increasing the risk of conflict, but actually we're taking the context into account so that whatever is being proposed is actually aligned and actually understands for example, customary principles, etc. If you're in the Horn of Africa, rangelands, and other types of considerations that should be taken into account. So that's a concrete way that we're moving forward with this and making sure that it's included, so that we can address it in the best way.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, that's on your part. I was curious to hear. I mean, we have many people walking around here, also at the World Water Week in Stockholm. Some of them, a majority of them, also from civil society. What would you say could be and should be perhaps the role of civil society that they can play in also sort of like helping and supporting water security for peace building in fragile contexts?
That's an excellent question. I think we are well aware of the important role that civil society plays in these situations and in any situations. And I think it comes from the understanding that, you know, if you're developing a project, whether it's regional, meaning many countries, or if it's national, we need to engage all the stakeholders. And research actually shows that if you're involving all the relevant stakeholders, the sustainability of the project increases drastically. So we want to hear all the voices, and that includes you know, from different genders and so on and so forth. But importantly, civil society often have a role and a reach that we in the World Bank or national governments may not have. So if we can engage with them in the stakeholder dialogues, in reaching communities, to make sure that we and the governments and the regional organizations are hearing their voice, they are playing an incredibly important role in sort of shaping the way we address the problems through the different projects and programs we are supporting.
So it's like the inclusiveness of getting all these different sort of like voices, making sure that you have different perspectives, and then it's the potentiality of the platforms that we then collectively would have that can spread the message. Victor, I saw you nodding. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think he spoke of sustainability, which is a key word. You can imagine we can invest in the infrastructure, for example, in these schemes and the borderlands, etc. But the typical situation is this vicious cycle of build, disrepair, rehabilitate, and how we break that and how we build things that last in such a context that is so volatile and difficult, right? We put a lot of thinking in the analytics, as I said before, on the management model. Is there a single silver bullet on what is the management model for these schemes to last? The answer is no. Really, there are different options that apply to different contexts. But if there is a common denominator of all these options, is the inclusion of civil society and the community engagement.
Right.
Whatever the model is, if it's private sector, is even professionalization of existing utility or any other modality, the community engagement component is very strong from the design of the project and how you design the water post, and specifically with a very strong component on inclusion and gender, which is again very challenging in some areas, is fundamental until the operation and maintenance at the end. Without that component, you have a higher risk of failure at the end. No?
You're only going to like skill the blind spots that you then have lost because you haven't had an inclusive, so to say, consultation process. I think that's a really important precursor to all of it, right? I mean, you've shared a lot of great insights with us so far, some concrete examples. If there's one message, one takeaway that you hope that everyone that is listening into this conversation walks away with, what would it be for you? Maybe Anders, if I can start with you.
Yeah, I think recognizing, and it's really what we talked about here in the end, recognizing that we need to listen to all voices. If we're in a fragile context, and if we want to really address the underlying challenges, whether it's water related or not, unless we engage the right people, broad stakeholder community engagement, I think we are, unfortunately likely to fail. So I think that's the sort of the key thing, I think, in all of this, and that I would like to send with people as we conclude here.
Victor?
I will add to that the flexibility
Mm.
to work in these environments because of the volatility of the situation. But the idea that if we apply just standard solutions without thinking too much, yeah, again, there's a reason for a higher risk for failure. So being flexible in with a solid ground on analytics, but also on the way we provide the finance, on the partnerships, applying a kind of knowledge into implementation, adaptive process that learn as you go a little bit, and really once you get it right, you can scale up. I think that is an approach that can work in some places.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I think those are two very important insights and sort of like foundational values that we need to take along in all the work that we do. I want to thank you so much for sharing all of that. I want to thank everyone here in the room with us in Stockholm for being here, and of course, to all those of you watching online, thank you so much for being here.